My name is Olivia Bennett. I'm 35 years old, and the morning I opened an email from the university I never got to attend, I was sitting in my cubicle at a logistics company staring at spreadsheets that had nothing to do with the life I was supposed to be living. The subject line said Alumni Relations Follow-Up, which made no sense because I wasn't an alumna of anywhere. I clicked it anyway, half expecting spam. Instead, I found 3 paragraphs that made my hands go cold. The message explained that a retired professor named Dr. Marion Grayson had recently passed away and left instructions in her will to establish a scholarship fund. The scholarship was created specifically in my name. The university was reaching out because they had questions about my academic history and wanted to confirm whether I had ever completed enrollment. I read it twice. Then I looked at the date on the email, checked the sender's credentials, and realized this wasn't a mistake. Someone I had never met had remembered me well enough to build something permanent around my name, and I had no idea why. My brother called that same afternoon. I saw his name on my phone and almost didn't answer because we hadn't spoken in months. When I picked up, his voice was tight. "Mom just told me the university contacted you," he said. "She's freaking out." I stared at my screen. "How does Mom even know?" "Because the lawyer copied her on some paperwork," he said. "Look, I don't know what this is about, but she's acting like you're going to do something." I should have asked what he meant. Instead, I said, "I haven't done anything. Not yet." Then I hung up, pulled up my old college acceptance letter from a folder I hadn't opened in years, and started remembering exactly how that future disappeared. Before I tell you what I found in that folder and why my mother was suddenly terrified of a scholarship with my name on it, tell me this. What time is it where you are right now? And have you ever had something taken from you so quietly that by the time you realized it was gone, everyone acted like you'd imagined it in the first place? 17 years earlier, I was standing in the guidance counselor's office at my high school, holding an acceptance packet from a university 2 states away. It was a good school, not Ivy League, but solid, known for its science programs and small class sizes. I had applied on my own, written my essays during lunch breaks, filled out the financial aid forms with my mother's tax documents spread across the kitchen table while she watched TV in the next room. The letter said I'd been accepted with a partial merit scholarship. The rest would come from the fund my grandparents had set up when I was 8. I knew that fund existed because my grandmother had told me about it herself before she died. She said it was for my education, that she wanted me to have choices she never had. My mother was in the kitchen when I told her. She was unloading the dishwasher and didn't look up right away. "That's nice," she said. "When do you need to confirm?" "By May 1st. I have to send a deposit." She closed the dishwasher and turned toward me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "We'll talk to your father." That night at dinner, I brought it up again. My younger brother, Ethan, was 16 at the time, quiet, good at math, terrible at everything else. He sat across from me, pushing pasta around his plate while I explained the scholarship, the timeline, the deposit amount. My father nodded along, but he wasn't really listening. My mother cut me off halfway through. "We need to talk about something," she said. "Your brother's struggling." I looked at Ethan. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Struggling how?" I asked. "His grades," my father said. "If he doesn't pull them up, he won't graduate on time. We're looking into a private program that can help him catch up. It's expensive, but it's the only option that makes sense." I didn't understand what that had to do with me. "Okay," I said. "So he'll do the program." My mother folded her hands on the table. "The program costs about the same as a year of college." I felt something tighten in my chest. "That's fine," I said slowly. "I have the scholarship and the fund Grandma left." There was a pause. Then my father said, "That fund isn't just for you. It's a family fund." I stared at him. "Grandma told me it was for my college. She told me herself." My mother's voice went softer, which somehow made it worse. "She wanted all of you to have opportunities. That includes your brother. And right now, he needs help more than you do. You'll be fine. You're smart. You can start at community college and transfer later." Ethan still wasn't looking at me. I wanted him to say something, to tell them this wasn't fair, but he just sat there staring at his plate like he wasn't even part of the conversation. I tried to keep my voice steady. If I don't accept now, I lose the spot. My mother stood up and started clearing dishes. You'll have other chances. Your brother won't. That was it. No discussion, no negotiation, just a decision that had already been made before I even walked into the room. I didn't go to my first choice school. I didn't go to any school that fall. Instead, I enrolled in 2 classes at the local community college and started working at a bookstore to cover the tuition myself. My parents said it was temporary, that once Ethan was back on track, we'd figure out my options. But Ethan's program stretched into a second year. Then he needed help applying to colleges. Then he needed help paying for his first semester because the schools he got into didn't offer much aid. Every time I brought up transferring, my mother had a reason why it wasn't the right time. Your brother's still adjusting. We just don't have the margin right now. You're doing fine where you are. By my 3rd semester at community college, I stopped asking. I picked up more hours at the bookstore, then got a second job doing administrative work for a property management company. I told myself I'd save enough to finish on my own eventually, but every time I got close, something else came up. A car repair, a rent increase, my mother asking if I could help with Ethan's books because his financial aid didn't cover everything. I helped because I didn't know how to say no. And because some part of me still believed that if I was patient, if I was good, if I didn't make it a problem, they'd realize what they'd taken from me and try to make it right. They never did. Ethan graduated 4 years later. My parents threw him a party. I showed up with a card and a gift I couldn't really afford and watched him pose for pictures in his cap and gown while my mother cried and my father gave a speech about how proud he was. Nobody mentioned that I'd been accepted to a better school with a scholarship. Nobody mentioned the fund. Nobody asked if I was planning to go back. I was 23 by then, working full-time as a logistics coordinator, living in a cramped apartment with 2 roommates. So far behind my original timeline that finishing felt impossible. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself I'd found a different path. I told myself that degrees didn't matter as much as people thought. I almost believed it. Years passed. I stayed at the logistics company because the pay was steady and the benefits were decent. I got promoted once, then again. I moved into my own place. I dated someone for a while, then didn't. I saw my parents maybe 3 times a year, always at their house, always on holidays. Ethan moved to another state for a job in finance. He sent a photo once of himself standing in front of a glass office building, smiling like someone who'd earned everything he had. My mother framed it and put it on the mantel next to his graduation picture. There were no pictures of me, not because they didn't exist, but because there was nothing worth framing. I hadn't graduated. I hadn't built the kind of life that looked good in a photo. I'd just survived. Then, 3 months ago, I got a message from an old high school friend asking if I'd heard about Dr. Grayson. I hadn't. She sent me a link to an obituary. Dr. Marion Grayson, retired professor of biology, respected mentor, beloved educator. The obituary mentioned her decades of teaching, her commitment to students, her work in conservation science. It also mentioned that she had recently established a scholarship fund in honor of a former student who had shown exceptional promise. I read it and felt nothing at first. Then I saw my name. The scholarship was called the Olivia Bennett Science Achievement Fund. I stared at the screen, trying to remember if I'd ever taken a class with her. I hadn't. I'd never made it to campus. So why did she know my name? The email from the university arrived 2 days later, and suddenly the question became urgent. I spent that evening going through old files, trying to find anything that connected me to Dr. Grayson. I found my acceptance letter. I found the financial aid summary. I found a course catalog I'd saved with certain classes circled in pen, including 2 biology courses I'd planned to take my first year. One of them had been taught by Dr. Grayson. That was the only link I could find. She would have been my professor, but I never showed up. So how did she remember me? I called the Alumni Relations office the next morning. The woman who answered sounded friendly but confused when I explained that I wasn't actually an alumna. "Oh," she said. "Well, that's unusual. Can you hold for a moment?" I held. When she came back, her tone had shifted. "Dr. Grayson left very specific instructions," she said. "The scholarship was created for you by name." She also left a letter. We weren't sure whether to send it since you're not in our system, but if you'd like to come by the office, we can give it to you in person." I asked when. She said any time. I drove to the university that weekend. It was 2 hours away, and I hadn't been on that campus since the day I'd visited during my senior year of high school. The buildings looked the same. The quad was full of students sitting on benches, walking between classes, looking like they belonged. I felt like a ghost. The alumni office was in an old brick building near the library. The woman at the desk recognized my name immediately and handed me a sealed envelope with Dr. Marion Grayson written in neat script on the back. I thanked her, walked outside, and sat on a bench under a tree that had probably been there when I was supposed to start school. Then I opened the letter. It was dated 6 months earlier. "Dear Olivia," it began, "I don't expect you to remember me. We never met. But I remember you. In the spring of your senior year, the admissions office forwarded me a folder of incoming students who had expressed interest in the biology program. Your application essay was in that folder. You wrote about your grandmother teaching you to identify plants on walks through her neighborhood. You wrote about wanting to study ecology because you believed understanding systems could help protect them. It was one of the best essays I'd read in years. I looked forward to meeting you in the fall. When you didn't enroll, I asked the registrar's office what had happened. They said you'd deferred indefinitely due to financial circumstances. I tried to reach you once, but the contact information on file wasn't current. Over the years, I thought about you often. I wondered if you'd found another path, if you were still interested in science, if life had been kind to you. I'm writing this letter now because I've been diagnosed with an illness that will not improve, and I've decided to use part of my estate to establish a scholarship in your name, not because I think you need rescuing, but because I want you to know that someone saw your potential even when circumstances made it invisible. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. It also means the university has reached out to you about the fund. I hope you'll consider using it, not because you owe me anything, but because you deserved a chance 17 years ago, and that chance is still waiting. Sincerely, Marion Grayson. I sat there on that bench with the letter in my hands and cried for the first time in years. Not because I was sad, because someone I'd never met had seen me, had remembered me, had built something permanent to say that I mattered, and my own family had never even asked why I didn't go. I called my mother that night. She answered on the third ring, sounding distracted. "I need to know something," I said. "When you used Grandma's fund for Ethan, did you ever plan to help me finish school?" There was a long pause. Then she said, "You were doing fine," I pressed. "That's not what I asked." She sighed. "Olivia, we made the best decision we could at the time. Ethan needed support. You were already working. It didn't make sense to split resources when you were handling things, so that's a no." Another pause. "What's this about?" I told her about the email, about Dr. Grayson, about the scholarship that had been created in my name for a school I never attended, because my family had decided my brother's needs mattered more. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I don't think it's fair to bring this up now. It's been almost 20 years. "Exactly," I said. "It's been almost 20 years, and you never once apologized." She hung up. The next morning, my mother called back. I was in the middle of a meeting when my phone buzzed, and I let it go to voicemail. When I listened later, her voice sounded strained, like she'd been up all night. "Olivia, we need to talk about this properly. Your father and I would like you to come over this weekend. Please don't make any decisions until we've had a chance to sit down together." I deleted the message and went back to work. But the truth is, I couldn't focus. My mind kept circling back to Dr. Grayson's letter, to the scholarship, to the fact that someone I'd never met had cared more about my future than the people who raised me. That evening, my best friend Maya came over with takeout and the kind of blunt honesty only a person who's known you since middle school can get away with. She sat cross-legged on my couch, chopsticks in hand, and said, "So what are you going to do?" "I don't know yet." She gave me a look. "That's a lie. You know exactly what you want to do. You're just scared they'll make you feel guilty for doing it." She wasn't wrong. Maya had watched me defer my entire life for my family. She'd been there when I worked doubles to help pay for Ethan's textbooks. She'd been there when I skipped her birthday trip because my mother guilted me into covering a car repair they said they couldn't afford. and then 2 weeks later posted photos from a weekend in Napa. She'd also been the one who told me years ago that being the dependable daughter didn't make me loved. It just made me useful. I picked at my noodles. They're gonna say I'm being selfish, that I'm holding on to something that happened almost 2 decades ago, that Ethan needed the help more than I did. Maya set down her food. Okay, let's say that's true. Let's say Ethan really was struggling and really needed that money. Did they ever sit you down and explain that? Did they ever say, "We're sorry, this wasn't the plan, but we're in a tough spot and we need to make a hard choice"? No. Did they ever offer to pay you back once Ethan was on his feet? No. Did they ever even acknowledge that what they did cost you something? I looked at her. No, I said quietly. Then this isn't about whether Ethan needed help 17 years ago. It's about the fact that they erased your future without asking, and then spent the next 2 decades pretending it didn't matter because you survived it. I nodded, feeling something hard settle in my chest. Maya leaned forward. You're allowed to be angry. You're allowed to take that scholarship and finally finish what you started. And you're allowed to do it without asking their permission. I went to my parents' house that Saturday anyway, not because I owed them an explanation, but because I needed to hear what they'd say when they couldn't hang up or hide behind a voicemail. My father answered the door. He looked older than I remembered, grayer, a little thinner. He gestured me inside without much of a greeting, and I followed him into the living room where my mother was already sitting with her hands folded in her lap, like she was waiting for a difficult appointment. Ethan was there too. I hadn't expected that. He was sitting in the armchair by the window, and when I walked in, he looked up but didn't stand, didn't smile, just nodded like we were colleagues at a meeting. I sat on the couch across from my mother and waited. She started with the voice she used when she wanted to sound reasonable. Olivia, I know you're upset, and I understand why this scholarship has brought up old feelings, but I think it's important that we all remember the context of what happened back then. I didn't say anything. She continued. Your brother was in a really difficult place. He was barely passing his classes. The school counselor told us that if he didn't get intensive support, he wasn't going to graduate. We were terrified. We didn't know what else to do. My father added, we made the choice we thought was best for the whole family. I looked at Ethan. Do you remember any of this? He shifted in his chair. Yeah, I remember. Do you remember that the fund was supposed to be mine? That Grandma set it up specifically for my college education? He hesitated. I remember Mom and Dad saying it was for all of us. That's not what Grandma said. My mother cut in. Your grandmother wanted all of her grandchildren to have opportunities. Yes, the fund was opened in your name because you were the oldest, but the intent was always to support the family. I pulled out my phone and opened a photo I'd taken the night before. It was a picture of a handwritten note my grandmother had given me on my 16th birthday. The note was still tucked inside an old journal I'd kept. I held up the screen. This is what Grandma wrote to me. For Olivia's college education, so she can build the future she dreams about. Not for the family, for me. My mother glanced at it, then looked away. People say things, Olivia. It doesn't mean they had a legal plan in place. Actually, I said, I looked into that. Grandma set up the fund through her estate. The documentation lists me as the sole beneficiary. You were named as the trustee until I turned 18. After that, the money was supposed to transfer to an account in my name. The room went very quiet. My father cleared his throat. Where are you going with this? I leaned back and kept my voice calm. I'm going somewhere very specific, Dad. I want to know what happened to that money after I turned 18, because I never saw a transfer, I never saw an account, I never even saw a statement. My mother's face went pale. We used it for your brother's education. You know that. Before or after I turned 18? She didn't answer. I looked at my father. Dad? He rubbed his face. The fund was depleted by the time you turned 18. Ethan's program costs were higher than we anticipated. There was nothing left to transfer. So you spent my entire college fund on Ethan before I was legally old enough to access it. Silence. Then my mother said, You have to understand, we were under so much pressure, we didn't have other options. You had the option to tell me the truth. Ethan finally spoke up. Look, I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't even know the details back then. They just told me I was going to a program and I went. I turned to him. You graduated 4 years later. You got a degree. You have a career in finance. Did you ever once think about the fact that you got all of that with money that was supposed to be mine? He looked uncomfortable. I figured you were okay. You were working. You seemed fine. There was that word again. Fine. My mother stood up. This isn't productive. We made a decision 17 years ago that we thought was right. You can be angry about it, but it doesn't change the fact that we can't go back and undo it. You're right, I said. You can't undo it. But you can acknowledge it. You can say that what you did was unfair, that you took something that wasn't yours to take and gave it to someone else without asking me. You can say you're sorry. My father's jaw tightened. We did what we had to do. No, I said. You did what was easiest. And you've spent 17 years pretending I didn't lose anything because I didn't make a scene about it. My mother's voice went sharp. So what do you want, Olivia? Do you want us to pay you back? Do you want an apology? Do you want us to admit we were terrible parents? What is it going to take for you to let this go? I stood up. I don't want you to pay me back, and I don't need your apology anymore. What I want is for you to stop pretending this didn't matter, because it did. It mattered then, and it matters now. I walked toward the door, and my mother followed me. If you take that scholarship, people are going to ask questions. They're going to wonder why you didn't go to school in the first place. Are you really going to air our family business like that? I turned around. Mom, I'm 35 years old. I've spent half my life trying not to embarrass you. I'm done. She stared at me. So, you're really going to do this? Yeah, I said, I really am. The following Monday, I called the Alumni Relations office and told them I wanted to accept the scholarship. The woman on the phone sounded genuinely happy. That's wonderful, she said. Dr. Grayson would have been so pleased. She walked me through the process. The scholarship covered tuition and fees for up to 4 years. Because I already had some community college credits, I'd be able to transfer in as a sophomore. I could start in the fall if I wanted, or wait until the spring if I needed more time to prepare. I chose fall. That gave me 4 months to get my life in order, to figure out how to balance work and school, to find a place to live closer to campus, to build the kind of future I should have had at 18. For the first time in years, I felt something that wasn't just survival. I felt hope. But hope doesn't mean the people who hurt you suddenly become reasonable. 2 weeks after I accepted the scholarship, my brother called. His voice was different this time, less defensive, more tired. Mom told me you're really going back to school. Yeah. He was quiet for a second. I've been thinking about what you said, about the fund, and I wanted you to know that I didn't realize how much it mattered to you. I almost laughed. Ethan, it was my college fund. How could it not matter? I know, I don't know. I guess I thought you'd moved on. I had to move on. I didn't have a choice. Another pause. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am. It was the first time anyone in my family had actually said those words. I didn't know what to do with them. Thanks, I said finally. Are you going to tell people? He asked. About what happened? I don't know. Maybe. Does it matter? He sighed. Mom's freaking out. She thinks you're going to make the family look bad. I'm not trying to make anyone look bad, Ethan. I'm just trying to finish what I started. He didn't say anything for a while. Then he said, I hope it goes well. I really do. We hung up, and I sat there staring at my phone, trying to figure out if his apology meant anything or if it was just another way to manage me. I still don't know. That same week, I got an email from someone I didn't recognize. The subject line said, You don't know me, but I knew Dr. Grayson. I opened it cautiously. The sender introduced herself as a former student of Dr. Grayson's who had graduated 15 years earlier. She said she'd heard about the scholarship through the university's newsletter and wanted to reach out. Dr. Grayson changed my life, she wrote. I came from a family that didn't value education, especially not for women. She saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. She fought for me to get funding. She wrote recommendation letters. She checked in on me even after I graduated. When I heard she'd created a scholarship in your name, I wasn't surprised. That's exactly the kind of thing she would do. She believed in people even when they couldn't believe in themselves. I just wanted you to know that whatever you decide to do with this opportunity, you're carrying forward something really important, not just for you, but for everyone she ever believed in. I read that email 3 times, then I printed it out and put it on my fridge, because sometimes you need a reminder that the people who see you aren't always the ones you're related to. By mid-June, I'd given notice at my job. My boss was disappointed, but understanding. I told him I was going back to school, and he said if I ever wanted to come back part-time, the door was open. I packed up my apartment and moved into a small studio 10 minutes from campus. It was cheaper than my old place and louder, but it had good light and a desk by the window where I could study. Maya helped me move. We carried boxes up 2 flights of stairs in the summer heat, and when we finally collapsed on my new floor with cold drinks, she looked around and grinned. "This is going to be good for you." "I hope so." She shook her head. "No, I know so. You've been half living for years. Now you're actually doing something that's yours." She was right. For the first time since I was 18, I was building something that no one could take away. And the best part? I didn't need my parents' permission. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their money. I just needed to show up. Classes started in late August. I walked onto campus on the first day with a backpack, a notebook, and the kind of nervousness that makes your hands shake. I was older than most of the students around me, not by a lot, but enough that I felt it. A girl in line at the bookstore asked me if I was a grad student. "No," I said, "just late." She laughed like I'd made a joke. I didn't correct her. My first class was Introduction to Ecology. The professor was younger than Dr. Grayson would have been, probably in her early 40s, with dark curly hair and the kind of energy that made you pay attention even when she was talking about soil composition. Halfway through the lecture, she mentioned Dr. Grayson. Some of you may have heard that we lost a beloved member of our faculty earlier this year. Dr. Marion Grayson taught in this department for over 30 years. She was a mentor to countless students and a fierce advocate for women in science. This semester, we're honored to award the first Olivia Bennett Science Achievement Scholarship in her memory. She looked around the room. "Olivia, if you're here, would you mind standing?" My stomach dropped. I hadn't expected this. Slowly, I stood up. Every face in the room turned toward me. The professor smiled. Dr. Grayson established this scholarship to support a student who showed exceptional promise but faced barriers to enrollment. Olivia is that student, and we're proud to have her with us. There was applause, polite, warm, brief. I sat back down as quickly as I could, my face burning. After class, a few students came up to introduce themselves. One of them, a guy named Marco, asked if I'd known Dr. Grayson personally. "No," I said. "I never got the chance." He nodded thoughtfully. "She must have seen something pretty special in you." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just smiled and changed the subject. But his words stayed with me. She must have seen something pretty special. The thing is, my family had looked at me my whole life and never saw it. The first few weeks were hard. Not because the work was impossible, but because I'd been out of school for so long that I'd forgotten how to study, how to take notes, how to manage deadlines when you're also managing a life. I worked part-time at a campus library to cover rent and groceries. My schedule was tight. I woke up early, went to class, studied between shifts, worked evenings, then stayed up late finishing assignments. It was exhausting, but it was mine. In late September, my mother texted me, "Your father and I would like to take you to dinner. We haven't seen you since you moved." I didn't reply right away. Maya told me I didn't owe them anything, that I didn't have to perform gratitude or forgiveness just because they suddenly wanted to check in. But part of me was curious, so I agreed. We met at a restaurant halfway between campus and their house. My mother was already seated when I arrived, and my father joined us a few minutes later. They looked uncomfortable, like people sitting in a waiting room hoping for good news. My mother ordered wine. My father ordered coffee. I ordered water. For a while, we made small talk. They asked how school was going. I said fine. They asked if I liked my professors. I said yes. They asked if I'd made friends. I said I was working on it. Then my mother set down her glass and said, "We've been talking, your father and I, and we want you to know that we're proud of you for going back to school." I looked at her. Okay. She hesitated. "We also want to acknowledge that things didn't go the way we planned all those years ago. We made decisions that were difficult, and we understand that you felt hurt by them." "Felt hurt," I repeated. My father jumped in. "What your mother is trying to say is that we did the best we could with the information we had at the time. Ethan was struggling and we had to make a choice. We chose to help him. That doesn't mean we didn't care about you." I set down my fork. "You didn't just choose to help him. You took something that wasn't yours and gave it to him without asking me. And then you spent 17 years acting like it didn't matter because I survived." My mother's face tightened. "We're trying to move forward here, Olivia." "So am I," I said. "But moving forward doesn't mean pretending the past didn't happen." She looked at my father, then back at me. "What do you want from us?" I thought about that for a second. "I want you to stop rewriting history. I want you to admit that what you did wasn't fair. And I want you to understand that I'm not going back to school because you finally decided to be supportive. I'm going because someone I never met believed in me when you didn't." My father's jaw tightened. "That's not fair." "Maybe not," I said, "but it's true." We finished the meal in near silence. When the check came, my father paid, and we walked out into the parking lot together. My mother hugged me before I got in my car. It was stiff and awkward, and she whispered, "I really am proud of you." I didn't say anything. I just got in my car and drove back to campus. In October, I received a letter from the university's financial aid office. It explained that because the scholarship covered tuition and fees, I qualified for additional need-based support for books and housing. I hadn't applied for it, but someone had flagged my file. The letter included a note at the bottom, handwritten. Dr. Grayson made provisions to ensure that recipients of this scholarship would have access to wraparound support. "You've earned this. Use it well." I sat in my tiny studio apartment holding that letter and felt something crack open in my chest. Not sadness, relief. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting for scraps. I wasn't justifying my existence. I wasn't proving that I deserved help. Someone had just decided I was worth investing in. And that changed everything. By November, I'd found my rhythm. I was doing well in my classes, better than well. I'd gotten an A on my first ecology exam and a B+ on a research paper I'd been terrified to turn in. One of my professors pulled me aside after class and said, "You have a strong analytical mind. Have you thought about undergraduate research?" I hadn't, but I said yes anyway. She connected me with a graduate student who was studying wetland restoration, and by December I was spending my weekends in the field collecting soil samples and learning how to measure biodiversity. It was cold, muddy, exhausting work. I loved it. That Christmas, I didn't go home. My mother called and asked why. I told her I had work to do. She said, "It's Christmas, Olivia." "I know," I said, "but I'm not ready." She didn't push. Instead, she said, "We'll miss you." I believed her. But I also knew that missing me wasn't the same as understanding what they'd done. Maya came to visit instead. We cooked dinner in my tiny kitchen, watched bad holiday movies, and stayed up late talking about the future. She asked if I was happy. I thought about it. "I'm getting there," I said. In January, I got an email from Ethan. The subject line said, "I need to tell you something." I opened it cautiously. He'd written a long message, longer than anything he'd ever sent me before. He said that over the holidays, he'd been going through some old boxes at our parents' house and found paperwork related to the fund, bank statements, withdrawal records, a letter from the financial advisor warning our parents that depleting the account before I turned 18 could have legal consequences. "They knew," he wrote. "They knew it was supposed to be yours, and they took it anyway." He said he confronted our mother about it, and she'd cried and said they didn't have a choice, that they were desperate, that they thought I'd understand eventually. Ethan's email ended with this: "I don't know if this changes anything for you, but I wanted you to know that I see it now. What they did wasn't okay. And I'm sorry I didn't say that sooner. I printed the email and put it in a folder with Dr. Grayson's letter and the note from financial aid, not because I needed proof, but because sometimes you need evidence that you're not imagining things, that your anger is justified, that your pain is real. In March, the university held an event honoring Dr. Grayson's legacy. They invited me to speak. I almost said no, but Maya convinced me. "You don't have to tell them everything," she said, "but you should tell them something, because your story matters." So I stood in front of a room full of students, faculty, and donors, and I told them the truth. I told them that I'd been accepted to the university 17 years earlier. I told them that financial circumstances had kept me from enrolling. I didn't say it was my family. I didn't name names. I just said that life had gotten in the way. Then I told them about Dr. Grayson's letter, about how a woman I'd never met had remembered me, about how she'd seen potential in an 18-year-old's application essay and held on to that memory for nearly 2 decades. I told them that her scholarship hadn't just given me access to education, it had given me proof that I was worth remembering. When I finished, the room was silent. Then someone started clapping, and then everyone else joined in. Afterward, a woman approached me. She was older, maybe in her 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes. She introduced herself as Dr. Grayson's sister. "I didn't know Marian had a sister." She smiled. She was very private, but she talked about you, you know. After she set up the scholarship, she told me she hoped you'd find your way back. She said some students just need someone to believe in them when their own families won't. I felt my throat tighten. She believed in me before I even met her. The woman nodded. That's who she was. We talked for a few more minutes, and before she left, she handed me a small envelope. Inside was a photograph. It was Dr. Grayson standing in front of a classroom, smiling at a group of students gathered around a lab table. On the back, someone had written, "Teaching is planting seeds you may never see grow." I kept that photo on my desk for the rest of the semester. In May, I finished my first full year. I passed all of my classes. I'd been invited to continue working on the wetland restoration project over the summer. And I'd been accepted into the ecology program's honors track. My parents sent a card congratulating me. Inside, my mother had written, "We always knew you could do it." I didn't respond, because the truth is, they hadn't known. They'd just assumed I'd be fine without their help. And I had been, not because I didn't need support, but because I'd found it somewhere else. Here's the thing I wish someone had told me when I was 18. Your family doesn't get to define your worth. They don't get to decide what you're capable of. And they don't get to rewrite history just because the truth makes them uncomfortable. I didn't go back to school to prove anything to my parents. I went back because a stranger saw something in me that my own family missed. And because I finally realized that being fine wasn't the same as being whole. My parents gave my college fund to my brother. They made that choice without asking me, and they spent 17 years pretending it didn't cost me anything. But it did. It cost me time. It cost me opportunities. It cost me the belief that I mattered as much as he did, and no amount of pride or congratulations now can undo that. But here's what they didn't take. They didn't take my ability to start over. They didn't take my right to build something new. And they didn't take the fact that someone, somewhere, believed I was worth investing in. So if you're reading this or watching this or listening to this, and you've ever been told that you're fine when you're really just surviving, I want you to know something. You're allowed to want more. You're allowed to go back and finish what you started. And you're allowed to do it without asking permission from the people who decided you didn't need help in the first place. Because sometimes the people who should have believed in you won't. And that's not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of theirs. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that it's never too late to reclaim what was taken from you, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to disappear. From my point of view, this story is a reminder that resilience, self-respect, and the courage to start over can rewrite your future. Education and critical thinking give us the tools to recognize unfairness and protect our own potential. Knowledge is power, and sometimes the greatest growth comes when we stop waiting for others to see our value and start seeing it ourselves. So I'll ask you this. If you were in my position, Would you have gone back to school, or would you have let the years keep passing, telling yourself it was too late? And if this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of your own struggles or gave you hope that it's never too late to start again, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe. There are more stories like this one, stories about people who refuse to stay invisible, and I'd love to share them with you.